The clock inside the courtroom rang out, 9 a.m. sharp. Every seat already filled. People had arrived early, the air buzzing with tension, curiosity, maybe even judgment. At the front table sat a woman, Danielle Hart, 34 years old, a mother of two, an emergency room nurse. She was still in her work uniform, faded blue scrubs that looked like they'd been through a war zone. Her hair, messy but managed, tied back in a loose, hurried bun. Her hospital ID badge was still clipped to her side, swaying slightly every time she moved. On her feet, worn-out sneakers told the story of the shift she just barely survived. A 12-hour overnight marathon, full of trauma codes, resuscitations, and heartbreaking goodbyes. Danielle hadn't stopped. Not even to shower. Not even to breathe. She left straight from the ER, heart still racing, mind still half in emergency mode, and came directly here to court. Not because she wanted to. This wasn't optional. This was the custody hearing. Partial custody case that could change everything. The challenge came from her ex-husband. He had recently lawyered up, hired someone slick and serious, and decided to claim Danielle wasn't emotionally stable. That she was too busy, too unavailable to be a good parent. He was making a case that she didn't have the time or the heart to raise their kids. But Danielle, she came prepared. She had paperwork. She had witnesses. She had truth on her side. What she didn't expect, though, what no one really could have, was how everything shifted the moment the judge laid eyes on her. Judge Lenora Barron, age 62, sat high above the courtroom in her usual sharp suit. Her expression as precise as the creases in her blazer. Known for her no-nonsense presence and stern courtroom decorum, she glanced up casually at first. Her gaze swept over the room, until it locked on Danielle. Her eyes narrowed, focused, and froze. Danielle's blue scrubs stood out like a flare. "Miss Hart," the judge began, voice clipped and tight. "Are you under the impression that this is a hospital?" Danielle blinked, startled but not flustered. "No, Your Honor. I just finished my shift. I came straight here." The judge's eyebrow arched, sharp enough to cut glass. "This is a courtroom," she said, her voice echoing slightly. "Not a hospital break room. You are expected to dress appropriately for legal proceedings." A wave of murmurs rustled through the room. Some gasped. Some just shifted in their seats, clearly uncomfortable. Danielle's lawyer opened his mouth, likely to defend her, maybe to explain the situation, but Judge Barron cut him off immediately. "Save it," she snapped. "Miss Hart, you're presenting yourself in a child custody hearing. And you show up in what appears to be pajamas." Danielle straightened. Not defensively, just proud. The whispers around her grew, the gallery unsure of how to feel. Some were mortified for her, others clearly moved. But Danielle, she didn't shrink. She lifted her chin, looked the judge directly in the eyes, and said, gently but with steel in her tone, "With all due respect, Your Honor, these pajamas still have blood on them." He paused. "It's not mine. It belongs to a 7-year-old boy I helped bring back from cardiac arrest. At 4:17 a.m. this morning." The room went still. "I didn't have time to go home. I didn't even have time to change. I had time to make one decision. Save that child's life, or be 5 minutes early to change my clothes for you." And just like that, the courtroom froze. The air felt heavier. The buzzing fluorescent lights hummed in the silence. Judge Barron, mouth slightly open, tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Not yet. Because in that room built for judgments and verdicts, something undeniable had entered. Something louder than procedure. Truth. Truth showed up in scuffed sneakers, blue scrubs stained with courage, and eyes that hadn't blinked through a night of chaos. Danielle's hands still carried the marks. Tape from 4 lines, ink from trauma board scribbles, the physical proof of her night's work. Her lawyer, Matt Listester, just stared, eyes wide, stunned like the rest of the room. And the gallery. They were no longer sitting still. People leaned in, drawn closer. A woman in the back pulled out her phone, quietly began recording. Judge Barron finally inhaled, long and deliberate. "This is not a stage for dramatics, Miss Hart," she said. But Danielle didn't bristle. She tilted her head, calm, respectful, unshaken. "No, ma'am. It's a courtroom. And I respect it enough to walk in straight from the place I saved someone's son, without stopping to change." The judge slammed her gavel once. A sharp crack in the quiet. "Let's proceed." But it was already too late. The moment had escaped the courtroom walls. Outside, that quiet video clip had already hit TikTok. Title: Nurse scolded for wearing scrubs to court. Her reply: pure dignity. By lunchtime, the clip had 600,000 views. By 2 p.m., over 5 million. Danielle's voice echoed across social media like a rallying cry. "Save a life or change for you. I chose the life." Hashtag started flying. Hashtag let her wear scrubs. Hashtag nurse justice. Hashtag respect the uniform. Local news picked it up before the court even recessed for lunch. National news anchors shared the story before dinner. But inside that courtroom, Danielle had no idea. No clue she was becoming a symbol. She wasn't watching TikTok, she was watching the courtroom clock, counting the minutes. Because after this hearing, she still had to go pick up her daughter. In those same scrubs. Only now, those scrubs weren't just clothes. That morning, just after the code blue was called and the adrenaline wore off, something quietly powerful happened in the hospital's family waiting room. The boys' parents, they found out where Danielle went after she'd helped save their son. They were still stunned, still shaking, sitting in plastic chairs that smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. And they wrote a note. Short one. Only 4 lines. They didn't use fancy legal jargon. No dramatic flourish. Just truth, raw, undeniable truth. Danielle handed that note to the courtroom clerk just before lunch. To whom it may concern, it read. If Danielle Hart had not stayed past her shift, our son wouldn't be breathing. Give her children back. She's earned them 100 times over. That was it. 4 lines. And yet, they hit harder than any closing argument ever could. A hush rolled across the gallery like a breeze through tall grass. You could hear soft sniffling echoing between the benches. Even the most stoic observers blinked a little too fast. Judge Barron didn't respond. Not immediately. She just sat still, frozen in her seat, staring at the paper in the clerk's hand. Her lips didn't move, but something in her eyes cracked, slightly, dully. Even her gavel, resting at her side, seemed hesitant to break the moment. Danielle, still seated, reached for a tissue and wiped her eyes. Not because she was breaking down, not because she was overwhelmed, but because, for once, someone else had spoken the truth she'd carried silently for years. The kind of truth she didn't know how to ask for. And in that moment everything changed. Not legally, not procedurally, but something in the courtroom's energy had permanently shifted. When recess was called for lunch, people didn't rush out. They didn't chat about legal arguments or family law technicalities. They weren't swapping takes on visitation schedules or custody percentages. They were talking about her. The nurse who showed up when it counted. The mom who never flinched. The woman in blue scrubs who chose a heartbeat over a dress code. And in doing so, reminded the legal system what real grace under pressure actually looks like. Outside, a crowd had formed. Quiet at first, then growing. Dozens of nurses. Some still in scrubs. EMTs in uniform. Even a couple of firefighters, boots still streaked with soot, had shown up in silent support. Word had spread like fire in dry grass. By 12:45 p.m. the moment had become more than a clip. It was a phenomenon. Fox News aired a headline that read, "The scrubs heard round the country." CNN followed minutes later with, "ER nurse shamed for uniform stuns court with final defense." And Danielle Hart's words. They were being quoted in Instagram captions, TikTok overlays, and Twitter threads. Not because she shouted them, but because she meant them. Her voice was a whisper with the weight of a mountain behind it. Inside the courthouse, in a room just off the main hallway, Judge Barron sat in her private chambers. Papers surrounded her. Her glasses perched low on her nose. And in her lap sat the full transcript of that morning's hearing. Every word, every pause, every breath. But this time she didn't read it like a judge. She read it like a mother. And it stung. Because in all her years on the bench, decades of rulings and deliberations, she had never once been faced with the kind of choice Danielle made that morning. A choice between saving someone else's child or protecting her own future with hers. And Danielle, she had done both, in the same hour. Meanwhile, just outside that quiet chamber, Danielle sat on a worn courthouse bench, legs tucked slightly under her, a half-eaten granola bar in her lap. Her lawyer, Matt, sat beside her. His suit jacket slung over one shoulder, sleeves rolled. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. Danielle nodded. "I'm not trying to be a symbol, Matt." He turned to her, looked her in the eyes, and said something that stuck. "You're not. Symbols are polished. They're quiet. You're just real." She gave a faint smile. "Truth's messy." Matt gave a small shrug, one corner of his mouth curling up. "So are scrubs." Down the hallway, a young court clerk approached, barely out of college, nervous but trying to be